Hey, this is Jordan. You're watching XDA Developer TV, and you don't know it, but this month's XDA Developer TV is brought to you by the Samsung Smart App Challenge 2012. Enter for your chance to win your piece of over $4 million in cash prizes by clicking the banner at the top of XDADevelopers.com or by visiting developer.samsung.com.
So proud.
It's Friday, June 22nd, 2012, and let's talk about the stories from this week over at XDADevelopers.com. The majority of the stories I saw this week had a lot to do with free and open source software, so I'm going to kind of focus on that. The first article I'd like to talk about is called Nvidia and the Problems with Closed Hardware. And what this article had to do with was the talk that Linus Torvalds, the creator of the Linux kernel, gave at Aalto University. Specifically, one real key point that he made, and that was giving the middle finger to Nvidia as a company. He says that Nvidia is the worst company that they've had to deal with, the most difficult they've had to work with, and as a longtime Linux user, I have to applaud that. I have to say, yes, indeed, Nvidia is a very difficult company to be working with. And actually, from the article, Adam seconded Linus's opinion as well and made it a point to mention Qualcomm also, because they are very closed and not very giving to the open source community. So all in all, very interesting to see a man like Linus stand up to the big monster company like Nvidia and give them the middle finger and just tell them off. One way or another, the article does make for a very interesting read if you want to know a little bit more about the ideas of openness and closed hardware and what companies you may or may not want to avoid. If you're interested in dealing with open hardware, definitely take a look at Adam's article. And speaking of openness and giving back to the community, Samsung has done it yet again. I've mentioned several times over the previous months that Samsung has been giving out the source code to their devices. Well, they have now gone ahead and released the GPL-compliant source code for the SGH-i747 and SGH-T999, which is the AT&T and T-Mobile varieties of the Galaxy S3. This is definitely another amazing step for Samsung. Thank you so much for doing this. And very interesting again to see this coming from a Qualcomm-based device, and of course a device that has yet to be released. So it will be excellent for the community to be able to get their hands on this source code and throw it out there into some ROMs and some patches and whatever else before the devices even hit the market. And since we're speaking of the Galaxy S3, I've mentioned a few times in the past that people have managed to get Ubuntu running on top of various and sundry Android-based devices. Well, the Galaxy S3 is no longer an exception to that. XDA forum member Tibor is responsible for writing a tutorial that makes it pretty simple to install Ubuntu on top of Android. Now catch what I said there, it is again running Ubuntu on top of Android. You run it within the terminal session and then you VNC into it, so it's not sort of really natively running Ubuntu on it, but it's one thing that you can do if you do want to have Ubuntu running on your Android device. However, one little caveat to all of this. Users are encouraged to be using a ROM that has a kernel that has loop support built into it. The one that is mentioned specifically here is Omega v4 ROM, so if you do have that one running already and you want to try out Ubuntu, go for it. Otherwise, you may be interested in flashing over to that ROM. I would do some reading up on the ROM first just to make sure it will suit you and your needs though. And speaking of Linux, one of the key things about running a Linux distro is the initialization, the startup, being able to start up scripts and apps and whatever else you want to do on startup. Now in order to do that in most distributions you use Init.d, and as it turns out Android is no exception. And with that in mind, XDA Recognized Developer Smokin1337, or as I'm sure he wants to be called, Smokin Elite, has been working on a mod that will allow you to use Init.d type scripts. The mod is actually called Easy Init.d, and from the article they say that it's been tested on the HTC One S and the One X, but it should work on any device. So if you do have any sort of scripts that you want to be able to run on your device, if you want to automatically start a backup, or automatically call somebody or text somebody or whatever when your device is started up, this could actually be a very cool security feature now that I'm thinking about it. If you wanted, you could have it email you anytime you power on with your current IP address or something. That would be kind of cool in my opinion. But thanks to this very easy mod that's easily flashable or incorporated into custom ROMs, now this is doable. And now let's move away from openness and open source and all of that fun stuff. As you probably know, Windows Phone 7 has been out for a little while now, and all of the Windows Phone 7 devices that are currently available are a little bit dated. The article calls them long in the tooth. Specifically, they all have single-core processors, they all have relatively low screen resolutions, and they're just having difficulty competing in this arms race as it is, with all of the dual-core, quad-core, tons of RAM, big screens, big screen resolution war that is going on. Well, this week Microsoft decided to remedy that by announcing Windows Phone 8, and actually this is going to be sort of a crossover. They're going to be having Windows Phone 8 along with Windows 8, and it's going to have a shared core. So essentially it'll be based on the same core OS, meaning it should be able to run all of the same applications. and it's completely ditching Windows CE, which is what all the previous Windows phones were based on. Now the article doesn't really go into much in terms of detail on this, but I would assume that also means that Windows 8 is going to work on ARM devices, and from what I've come to understand, it does look like there are going to be Windows 8 ARM-based devices, ARM tablets and things of that nature. And having looked at the interface itself, yeah, that's understandable. Now the big downfall to all this that I can see is that it's not going to be supported on legacy devices. So if you have a Windows Phone 7 device, you're kind of up a creek. Now that said, I can't tell you how many Android-based devices I've seen be shipped up the creek in the exact same fashion because they will not support the latest and greatest version of Android. On the other side of that, the community does seem to jump in more and more often on these older devices and keep them going. As we've mentioned a couple of times in the past, older devices like the HD2 are getting some of the latest and greatest versions of Android. So, I don't know, will there be a community that actually jumps in and says, we'll save the older devices, we'll make it work? I don't think it's really code compatible, so probably not. One way or another, if you do want to learn more about Windows Phone 8 or Windows Surface, something that I didn't get a chance to talk about or really do any reading about, any of that sort of fun stuff, there is a new forum that's been added for all of that. And of course you can read the article over on the XDA developers website. And the last couple of things to mention are a little bit of XDA housekeeping type stuff. There was a video put out this weekend by XDA Elite Recognized Developer and XDA TV Producer AdamOutler talking about how to turn an Android device into a web server. If you have not seen that video, definitely go take a look at it. It's got a lot of very cool stuff in it. And his website is actually running on his Samsung Captivate now, from what I can tell. And if you haven't noticed, the forums have an XDA 2013 beta theme now that you can try out. So do feel free to take a look at this new theme and let us know how it works out for you. But as always, that's all I've got for you today. Thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, do make sure to hit the like button down below. If you want to see our new content as soon as it comes out, hit the subscribe button up above. Have a great weekend, guys, and I will see you in a couple of days.